Hello there. After finishing Silksong, I really wanted to share my thoughts about the game. It is a very strong sequel for Hollow Knight, and it did not disappoint. It's a very amazing game with a lot of really cute art, and you can see the love that was poured by the developers into making this game and its art. First of all, we're gonna talk about the art of the game. So it kept the same cute art style from the first game, put a lot of effort into the game's mechanics and animations. The game looks really nice and crisp. Haven't seen any glitches or bugs or anything of the sort. The animations are very spot on. It is a very gorgeous game with a lot of gorgeous environments and enemy type. Not only the enemy types, but bosses as well. They did cook with the art really well for this one. The game provides you with a map and a lot of choices to choose where you want to go. There's a lot of exploration in the game, so some people might end up in different positions than the rest. So it is a pretty unique path setting for each person. Of course, there are like limits, but later on, with more abilities, you will be unlocking more opportunities to explore wider areas of the map, or like new locations that might not be reachable for at that given time. But later on, you definitely explore a very huge map. I'm not gonna share the map because it's like, don't want to like go into the spoilers and spoil something for everyone. So the game is really huge. The map has a lot of potential and a lot of exploration. So you're definitely gonna have a lot of time finding different biomes and new areas, new enemy types. There's plenty of it. The game's combat is a little bit more complex than in the first game, I would say. It is more fast-paced, and it does provide you with bigger risk, bigger reward type of mentality. But not always that is the case. Sometimes being too aggressive might be hurting your character a little bit more than necessary. So you need to find the balance between some of the enemies which you can exploit and be more aggressive with, and some enemies you need to like slow down a little bit and keep the pace not as fast and not as aggressive to be dealing with them more properly. The most annoying enemies though in the game are definitely the flying enemies. The flying enemies were a bunch of kind of pricks, let's say that. They're very tedious to deal with because of their flying patterns, and sometimes you are not even able to reach them. But they certainly can reach you though. From most of the time they land very fast and out of nowhere. So you gotta avoid those a little bit more and be more cautious of their movesets and how to best deal with them. The combat is very smooth though in the game, but it might be very difficult as well. It depends on your playstyle, it will depend on your crests, it will depend on your playstyle, and it will depend on your tool usage and all of the items that the game actually provides you with. The game's difficulty. A lot of people were complaining that the game is very difficult in the beginning and it keeps on. It kinda is right. It is correct to a degree, let's say that, because the game's difficulty is gonna be as hard as you're gonna make it. Because there are so many tools that you can use and so many ways you can change your like pogo attacks, your main character attacks with the crests that I'll actually allow you to do that. The tools you're gonna be using, the throwables, or it's gonna be like pins that you drop on the floor, and how aggressively you're gonna play the game as well. So it all depends on you how hard the game is gonna be for you. In general, slowing down and not being as aggressive will make the game a lot easier for you than being overly aggressive, because there are some bosses that can read your inputs and they are gonna counterattack you like instantly. So let's say you're doing pogoing and you're deciding to do like more pogos than necessary. The boss might jump at any point, it's gonna go through your hitbox and it's gonna remove the flow of the combat itself like really quickly. So you need to be aware of those things and be prepared for like dodging or dashing, because that is the only way to escape those situations. But sometimes, and most times, those situations are inescapable. So you gotta just slow down and just follow the boss's rhythm in order to follow up like the counterattacks or get some attacks in during those fights. The game has a ton of bosses, and majority of the bosses are really well designed. They have really nice animations, interesting attack patterns. You have to learn things. You gotta adapt to the things that they're throwing at you and choosing the best ways possible to avoid their attacks and also maybe counter their attacks. But there definitely were some bosses that I did not prefer as much. The majority of those bosses were the ones that summon adds. Let's say they summon additional bugs to the fights. The majority of those fights were tedious and they were not as great as the bosses that had like more mechanical attacks, let's say that. Because always dealing with the ads can spawn from any direction, so they can easily break your flow of combat. They can easily distract you from the main priority or from the main boss's attacks, and you can get hit during those like moments if you like gonna switch targets from the boss to the summoned ad. That happens a lot in this game though. So you need to like, the best way to deal with those bosses, I would say, is just to like focus down the ad as soon as possible and be aware of the boss's mechanics as well at the same time. If you see that the boss is flying off or like going off and doesn't try to attack you, then just get rid of the ad as fast as possible and then focus back on the boss. Majority of the time that's gonna help you out the most. The game has a lot of hidden bosses as well. If you're gonna do like exploration through all the free acts, and I definitely encourage you to do the free acts because you're gonna have a bigger piece of the game. Although in my opinion, the third act was not as great as the first two in my opinion. Although in later stages of Act 3 it gets better, but majority of the bosses that they put, like the optional bosses that you can find and choose, some were challenging and some were interesting, but not all of them. Majority of them were actually ad fights. So that was what I didn't like about some of the bosses, because the ad fights just produce and the unnecessary difficulty and makes it a little bit harder just because it adds the randomness effect. So you're kind of confused and you get lost which targets you should attack. Usually it's always the ads, but sometimes you can avoid those as well, and the bosses sometimes can defeat them by themselves if they do an attack like a slash or something like that. And if it hits their ad, majority of the time they can defeat their own summons. But yeah, third act was great for the main quest line. The side quest lines or the side activities or bosses were a little bit like more disappointing, let's say that, but they were not bad still. They were pretty good bosses, even though they had, majority of them had ads. They're still good designed bosses in the Act 3. Although I think the Act 3 was a little bit maybe lackluster compared to the first two, because the first two acts had a lot of better boss designs. So let's talk about tools and quests. So yeah, their game has a variety of tools and quests that you can use to fit your playstyle, if you're more aggressive, if you're less aggressive. There are definitely a variety of those in the game. The ones that I preferred using was definitely the Wanderer's quest. I liked the speedy attacks and that fit my playstyle a little bit more better. I liked the pogoing, that it became more diagonal rather than like vertical. But it depends on your playstyle. Sometimes maybe you will be enjoying different kinds of tools. The tools are definitely a strong arsenal in the character's menu, just because you can have and combine so many opportunities and chances and abilities to use. So for the tools, you can combine some of them and you can make poison tools that actually deal a ton of damage to the bosses. It depends on which tools you're going to be using. You can always switch them up on different bosses and different tactics. There are definitely a lot of bosses that you can be punishing with dropping tools on the ground, or there are definitely bosses that tend to fly more, then you can punish them with different like throwing tools, and they are definitely very strong. Most of the builds that you can use with the tools, you can annihilate bosses really quickly, just because they provide you the essential hits when you can't do the melee hits, and that is very most often the case, because the bosses tend to like go away from you, so you gotta face that too. Tips and tricks. For the majority of the bosses, the best strategy is always going to be attacking the boss and moving to the opposite side of the boss itself, because you need to like be aware of what the boss is gonna hit next. Don't overdo with a lot of attacks unless you're using the Beast Crest and you're gonna like be using the heal mechanic, which I saw like a lot of people were doing. It's definitely a working strategy, but if it doesn't fit your playstyle, 1 to 2 attacks is the max you can actually do on the bosses. 1-2 attacks, you back away, or even with slower crests you will probably only be able to do 1 attack. And you just gotta stay on the opposite side of the boss just to avoid anything that the boss might throw at you. Sometimes it is possible to pogo on the boss longer and stay on the boss, but it can really easily get out of flow and you're just gonna get knocked out or hit or hurt during that process. So be careful with that. Using tools is not a shameful thing, definitely use them. On most bosses, you definitely need to use the tools because it makes the fights a lot easier, and some bosses don't allow you to attack them as much. So the tools come in handy, because if the boss doesn't allow you to melee attack him as much, then you can use your tools by throwing a few of the knives or whatever you're using. Definitely explore every single wall and cranny, because there's so many secrets in the game. You can find a lot of interesting things in the game. Definitely a lot of secrets, definitely a lot of upgrades. Another tip I would give you is when you have rosary beads, don't use them instantly when you get them. Try collect as many as you can. There's gonna be like a lot of quests that require you to pay, like, let's say 500 rosary beads. So during those moments, use them then, and you will be able to finish the quest a lot easier, and you won't be needing to farm beads as much as necessary. Or you might want to buy some tools from the shops, because there's definitely like going to be some tools in the shops that you want to buy. Definitely save up the ones that you can use for your character. It's like Souls in the Souls game, where you get the item and let's say you use it and you get like 100 souls. This game has the same thing, and some of them are like 30 beads, some of them are 60 beads, some are 120 beads. So collect them, and once you have them, don't use them instantly. Just save them up for the necessary purchases in the future for your character. If exploring areas, you don't really need to fight the enemies as much as you will encounter them. There's definitely a lot of enemies. Usually it is just faster to go through them and just avoid the battles, and you're gonna explore a lot more of the map more safely that way. But if you want to fight and improve your skills on, let's say, like pogo, or just in general like fighting enemies and dodging them out, it's definitely like good practice dummies out there, and it definitely will reward you. Avoid some areas that are like a little bit more tough for you to handle at first. The areas definitely vary in their difficulty, so some areas are a little bit easier to traverse and some areas are a little bit more challenging. Some areas are more filled with enemies, some areas are more filled with platforming puzzles or jumping puzzles. So you gotta be prepared for what comes next, but definitely try to avoid the areas that are a little bit harder, or if you do need to go through them, it will be just a good practice to learn the game's mechanics a little bit better. So don't be discouraged to explore, but if you're having a really hard time with going through an area, just try exploring a next place. Maybe it will get easier. Game story. So the game story is very nice and unique. It's not hard to follow. It's very a simplistic story, let's say that. The story goes on not only from the cutscenes, but also with interacting with other bugs. So you're gonna get a lot of dialogues. So I encourage you to read those as well, because it provides more information about the whole kingdom and the whole plot in general. The story is definitely easy to understand and follow through. Definitely it pulls more interest if you're completing the third act rather than finishing 2 acts in general. If you finish Act 3, you will get the true ending of the game, which I really encourage you to do. It provides more lore for the character, and it's definitely worth playing through the game throughout its entirety by completing everything you will be able to find in the game. Game's objectives. The game has a lot of objectives, which some of them you will find on notice boards, which are called wishes. Wishes, aka quests. Also, you will get some wishes from some bugs that you will find along the way as well. The wishes quests are varied. Some of them were better made, some of them were not as entertaining or not as interesting. There's a lot of variety to it. Some of the wishes are going to be like for you to collect the right amount of the rosaries. I think these are like the least favorite ones, because all you have to do is just pay like, let's say 500 rosary beads, and the village gets a little bit more of an expansion. You will see definitely the expansion, what is happening and all. That's kind of a cool idea, but the quest itself is just like pay 500 rosaries. Is not as entertaining as going and fighting a boss or something like that. Definitely worth doing all the wishes, because it will provide you the route to Act 3. The more wishes you complete, the faster you will get into Act 3. And you definitely need to finish all of those throughout Act 1 and Act 2 in order to unlock Act 3. It will also unlock more of the map for you too, once you're like doing the wishes. Because some areas are unlockable only by taking upon the quests or the wishes that they provide you with. The wishes, in my opinion, that were like the least favorite were the ones that you had to kill a lot of bugs and, like, let's say collect some meats, So basically fetch quests were not as great in the game. The best ones were definitely like when you unlock a different boss fight or an optional boss fight. There was one specific quest that I will give you some pointers for. It's gonna be a wish in Bellheart, and you will have to collect bells. So the bells are gonna be at the top part or below the Bellheart itself in the bell tunnels. They spawn randomly. So you will have to go into those areas, you find one bell, and if you find one bell, you go back to Bellheart, you rest at the bench, and you do the exploration again. The bell can spawn at a random location wherever in those bell tunnels. So you gotta go either down or up where you fought the widow. So you will be exploring those tunnels. And once you find the bell, you just gotta leave those areas and go back to a bench, rest up, and go exploring again until you find 8 bells. Yeah, that's kind of tedious. That quest was not really great. I think that one was like my least favorite because it's just like was annoying to go back and forth all this time just to find 8 silver bells. In addition, I think the wish system was not as bad because it provided you with more exploration and it allows you to find specific or more hidden areas like a little bit easier than not knowing where you need to like find something special by hitting a wall or something like that. So it provides you a little bit of a guidance as well. So that thing I think is a really good addition to the whole quests that they did for this game. Jumping puzzles. There's a lot of jumping puzzles and a lot of hidden jumping puzzles in the game. Puzzles are very interesting, they're actually good, but they can test your patience definitely as well. So you gotta be prepared. You gotta focus most of the time, because one slight error in those and you're just gonna fall, die, or get spiked or anything of the sort. So you gotta be prepared for like a little more challenge than maybe in the first game. Although the Path of Pain, I would say, was a lot harder in the first game than in the second one. Second game provides you with more tools, and usually it's just like going up instead of going sideways, like it was in the first game. Path of Pain, I do remember really well, although I played the Hollow Knight 3 years ago, but Path of Pain stuck in my mind for quite a long time. I'm still remembering each jump that it had, and it's definitely more traumatizing than the jumps in Silksong though. But the puzzles are really worth doing. At the end of the day, you're gonna get the satisfaction of climbing whatever tower you had to climb and getting the reward for it. Even though it not might be as impressive a reward as you thought, but most of the times it's something actually really good. Things I didn't like or cons of the game. There's a few things in particular that I didn't like a lot about the decision making of the developers. One of them was your character's hitbox touches an enemy's hitbox and you're gonna get hurt and losing health over it. So I think that is like a very tedious mechanic for the Metroidvanias, but is very, very specific to these type of games most of the time. It's very rare that Metroidvanias have. I do understand when you're gonna get hit by an attack, like let's say the boss does a slide attack. The boss does a jump slash attack or something of the sort. I understand those kind of mechanics that they damage you. But touching a boss or the boss's toenail, that just doesn't make sense to me. I think it's a very tedious mechanic. It can disrupt your flow if you're like going for the boss in a more aggressive manner, and just like ruins the whole flow for you to getting hit by just touching barely the boss or just touching a boss. It's so unforgiving and it's so tedious most of the time. I really hate this mechanic in Metroidvanias. I understand why they put it. It makes the game harder. You need to be more aware of your character. You need to be more calculative about your dodges and how far you're gonna go, but sometimes you just click a button and you just barely touch a boss's footprint and it's just like, you know what, oh, I think you're gonna lose some health there, boy. No, well, it's kind of annoying to deal with, but I do understand from the game's priority why they made it and why they choose to stick with this mechanic to make the game harder. But I really think it would have shined a lot more if they just removed this thing. Second thing I really hated was the skill and the tool button was the same button basically. If you're playing on controller, it's gonna be like the R1 button. The main difference between using a skill and a tool is for a skill you just need to press R1, and for the tool you need to like press the analog stick upwards and then press R1. Guess what happens in most occasions when you're playing the game? Usually you're gonna lock on the analog stick and you're probably gonna hold down the up button or the down button or whatever side you're going for, and it's not gonna use the skill then. So yeah, that is a very stupid decision and I did criticize this one throughout my playthrough. I think that is a very, very bad decision. I think they could have done the tool and the skill usage for 2 different buttons in total. The triangle could have been a really good button for a skill or for a tool use. You didn't need to put needle in skill on that button. The triangle button, hello. You could have placed it somewhere else, definitely. It was such a tedious thing. Yeah, it just I started misclicking this so many times that it just started to annoy me so much. And I think I'm not the only one that had this issue with the skill and tool button being the same button. The only difference is where you hold your analog stick. And guess what? Most of the time you're going to be holding it down if you're doing pogos, or you're going to be holding it up if you're trying to jump over the attack of a boss and try to use the tool at the same time. Yeah, that one I did not like. I think that was a terrible decision by the developers, and they could have done it with a different button and in a different way, definitely. Other than that, I think the game did really well, and I don't think there is a lot of place to criticize for it. These were the only 2 things that really annoyed me in the game. Other than that, the game doesn't have that many flaws. Only like a few nitpicks you can take and say about it. It's like if you didn't enjoy the boss fights, which had summoned ads, let's say more bugs in the fight of the boss. The criticism that might fall for the game are probably going to be very individualistic for everyone. Everyone will have their own problems. For some, it will be the difficulty of the game. I didn't find the game to be very difficult. I think it was challenging to some bosses, especially like on the last fight, for the last fight of Act 3. I'm not gonna spoil, I'm not gonna say what it is. But if you tend to overdo the pogos on the boss, and it's not that difficult to like do pogos on that one. You just gotta follow the pattern. But the boss can actually counterattack you like so easily in that situation that it will break your flow completely. You're gonna get hit by one thing, another thing coming in, and you're just gonna like get nuked very quickly in that fight if you're like doing very aggressive pogo jumps on that one. The best strategy was like just to stay and just do dashes or jump dashes over the boss majority of the time. Because if you're just trying to do the pogos, it's gonna bite you back really quickly. But there were only like a couple of bosses that did that. Majority of the bosses tend to actually be more forgiving and allow you to do the pogos if you're like doing them really well. So yeah, I don't think the game has a lot of things that could be criticized for. Maybe some people didn't like some of the bosses. Everyone will have their different opinion about what they liked about the game and what they didn't. In conclusion, I really liked the game. I really liked the artwork. The music was really fire in most fights. Although some areas didn't have the music, but every single boss did. And the songs on the boss fights were phenomenal. I think majority of the boss designs were also really great. The areas were really beautiful and colorful. The game definitely has a lot of things to offer for you. If you enjoyed the first Hollow Knight, you're gonna love the second one as well. So I really highly recommend you playing this game if you enjoyed the first one. It's definitely worth the buy. It's not an expensive game. It's definitely worth supporting the developers. Hopefully they're gonna make more games in the future. Although this took like 7 years to make for them, but they did really cook with it. And really enjoyable game, really good art style. Everything in the game is like so smooth. It definitely shows the love of the developers that they put in the effort, and they did put the work in it as well. I really hope you enjoyed this video. So don't forget to subscribe to the channel, leave a like, leave a comment what you think about the Silksong as well. And I'll be seeing you around in the next one. Don't forget, get good and shaw and keep exploring.